أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين. روحي وأرواحنا لترى بمكتمه الفداء، فقد قال الله في كتابه المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the hastening of the reappearance of our Imam, please recite a louder salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And to the extent of our devotion to Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, let's recite the loudest of salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum jameen. Before I start talking on the speech, I think it's important and necessary for us to remind ourselves of what's happening in the world today, in these days. The tragedies that are happening in Gaza, just recently, another airstrike, another sort of encampment, that so many innocent people dying. There used to be a time perhaps when we would think to each other and say to each other, how could it be that Abu Abdullah Hussein and the caravan and innocent people would be put under so much oppression and Muslims wouldn't say anything and wouldn't stop it? Unfortunately, we have the answer now, right? Looking at current events, where we see such oppression happening to such an extent, and Muslims ourselves perhaps are staying quiet and silent. This isn't something that is in any way in line with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. We have to use something around us in our environment to wake ourselves up. Right? At the very least, we can do a dua, we can say something for their success, for their victory. And for that sake, let's recite a Surah Fatiha for all of those who have passed and inshallah their quick victory. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Another thing I wanted to mention, I've been wanting to mention it for past couple of days. There's a brother who usually sits near the front with his children. He's not here right now, or at least I don't see him, so I'm saying it because he's not here. But it's really beautiful that both himself and his children, I'm assuming it's his children, always write notes. They have a notepad, they have a pen, and there's writing throughout the speech. They're taking notes. And I'm not saying this about my speech specifically, not at all, right? I'm not saying that I have something that's worthy and you should definitely be writing it down. And no, what I'm saying is a general point, that when a proper scholar comes and is giving in some lecture and sort of talking, then we should always want to keep a note of it, keep some sort of record of it. We can't sort of depend on our memory on sort of telling us what exactly happened after it. And I assure you that for most of us, after we end a lecture and sort of think back on it, we've probably forgotten most of it. We probably can't really tell what exactly was even talked about, right? But if we take notes, if we write down something, jot down something, then it stays. And we can think about it more, we can ponder about it more, we can use it more. And inshallah, that's something, a practice that we can all adopt, is that whenever we're in a session, whenever there's a thing of someone speaking on any topic, then we use that opportunity to keep notes, write something, to remind ourselves, to be able to think about it, to ask questions further on, right? If someone else says something about that topic later on that can expand our knowledge, be more aware of it, be prepared about topics, right? And that's something that I think we have to be actively doing, right? Otherwise, passively just sitting in the majalis and listening to things, most of the time, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, the words come in through one ear and they go out the other, right? And it has very little effect. So if we want heightened effect and impact, then we have to be more active in our engagement as well. What we've been talking about so far in these past days and nights has been the intellect, and how the intellect has this ability to change our lives because it is our true self, and our awareness of things, true awareness of things, is in a real way building ourselves in one way or another. And in the practical sphere of our lives, our decisions are based on that ilm, that intellect. And so it determines which direction I go. My knowledge and awareness of reality determines in which direction I go, in what things I decide, and how I decide things. And it's only if I want to make decisions contrary to my knowledge. I say that I know that this thing is bad, I know this is a sin, I know that I'm not supposed to be doing it. In order for me to be able to commit that sin despite my knowledge of it being wrong, I have to put myself in a state of ghaflat. I have to put myself in a state of heedlessness, where I convince myself that something else is more important, something else is better for me. And it's only then that I can sort of move based on this. So again, there's a link still between the knowledge and the actions. Now what we've talked about so far is on the level of individuals and our individual decision makings and so on and so forth. But we also want to talk about it on a social level too. On the social level, what does it look like to have a true intellect-based society? How does it appear? How do they make decisions? How do they walk and talk? Before we even get to that though, there's misconceptions that we have regarding societal movements and our expectations on how things should change and happen. Sometimes we imagine that in order for, we see all of the ills and oppressions within society, and we desire for all of that to change and become better. We want a utopia, a place of ultimate ideal living. But we expect that to happen without any sort of sacrifice, any work, any sort of pushing of ourselves. In the verse that I quoted in the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will not change a people until they change themselves. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not create that change until those people change themselves. And so the limiting factor for change happening and occurring is ourselves. If we need to point fingers to see why is it that our society hasn't been cured and hasn't reached that ideal state where it should, then we have to point the fingers at ourselves. Because we're the limiting factor. Now, this sometimes goes very contrary to our expectations of, our last Imam, the Imam that we're waiting for. Where we think that he'll come and then sort of wave a wand and everything will become, peaceful and happy and everyone will get along and everyone will turn towards Islam. That's not how it will work. If that was how it would work, then why hasn't he come back yet? You could just do it at any time. The reality is that it requires a lot of sweat and tears and blood and sacrifice. Primarily from ourselves. We need to pave the way for the Imam's return. In a real way, he's waiting for us rather than us waiting him. And if we were truly waiting for him, he would have come. Now that's not my topic, and I don't want to go too much in depth on this. But it's important to sort of start thinking along those lines. of not thinking about social change as something that has to happen by someone else. Rather, we should be always thinking in the framework that society is built upon the shoulders of the smallest unit of the society, which is the family, and we are the things that make up that family. And so the individuals that make up that society, that are the constituents of that society, need to make those change in order for that society to become better. Now, in terms of this, intellectual-based society, we've talked about, how that so-called golden age of Islam is not really a golden age of Islam. Even though there's a lot of progress in terms of scientific discoveries, in terms of philosophy, in terms of all of these various technological advancements of that time. But despite that, it's not progress. It's not true progress. It's not a true intellectual-based society. How could we claim that just because Harun al-Rashid opened up this, house of wisdom and called for translations to come and all of these things and starting these things, that it's a sort of progress? No. This is the same Harun al-Rashid who's taking Imam Kadhim al-Islam from one prison to another until he's poisoned and martyred. Same Harun al-Rashid that does so much dhulm upon the Shia. That's not progress. We can't see that society and say that, they're going towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No. That's not what's happening. So the hallmarks of a society that is intellectual, truly intellectual, is their progress towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether that's paired with intellectual progress in terms of science and technology or not. I'm not saying those are wrong, as I've said again and again, but they're not the crucial ingredient. They're not the fundamental ingredient. The fundamental thing is the movement of society towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the question turns to this. If we want to become different, if we want to change and become a society that is acting on their intellect and moving towards that intellect, what should we be doing? And in order to answer that question, we first have to recognize what is stopping us. What is holding us back as a society of believers, as a community of believers? Why haven't we made it yet? There's a great scholar, Ayatollah Shah Abadi, who wrote a book called Shadarat al-Ma'arif, or I guess the translation would be something like The Golden Flakes of Wisdom. It's a very beautiful book where he talks and addresses this exact topic. He addresses why is it that Muslim society has not made it yet. And he goes through several factors and his advice on improving things, which are all extremely very interesting. If this book was in English, then I would have heavily encouraged people to read it. Unfortunately, I don't think it's been translated, but if anyone knows Farsi, then definitely you should read this book. Within it, he identifies several factors. I'll mention two of them, because they're interesting in their dichotomy. One of them is that us as Muslim, as mu'mineen, have a level of arrogance within ourselves. Because we say to ourselves that we're on the right path. And it's true, inshallah, we are on the right path. But because we're constantly saying to ourselves, we're on the right path, it subconsciously puts this idea within us that we don't need to do anything, because we've already made it. We've already achieved that success. And so because we're constantly saying to ourselves, you've done it, you've achieved it, heaven is yours, don't need to do anything, then progress is hindered. Movement is hindered. Change is hindered. And we don't change those things that need to be changed within our societies. We don't address those ills and ailments that are there. Now that's on one side, that arrogance. On the other side, almost a seemingly paradox, is that we also have a sense that it's almost like hopeless and impossible to achieve the ideal. We say to ourselves that, how can we build an Islamic society? How could we, do with everything, implement all of the wajib and avoid all the haram at a societal level, right? There's so much haram happening, so much bad happening. How could it possibly be that we can make a society that's everyone is doing their wajibat and avoiding the haram? How's it possible? We imagine it as something that's not even possible, and so we don't make any movement towards it. It's similar to how we're said in the Quran, how the Jews used to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where it says, قالت اليهود يد الله مغلولة. Right? They say that the hands of Allah are chained, are bound. They say that God can't do anything. And they were saying it in a particular circumstance. But it's that idea, that concept where we think the same thing. Right? The whole point isn't that me and you should be able to change something by our own physical abilities and our own insight and knowledge. The point is that we do our duty and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't even expect the Prophet to make change in the hearts of the people. He says to the Prophet, that change of the hearts is in my hands, it's not in yours. All you have to do is do the bayan. Tell the people, do your duty, I'll do the rest. That's the same thing that we need to be doing. If you can say a salawat and move forward, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Please keep pushing it. Come on, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So we have to recognize, right, before we even get to the point of changing things specifically about our situation and the characteristics of the people in our society, we have to recognize that it's possible. That the ideal, what we're aiming for, is something achievable. If we keep on saying to ourselves that ideal, what we're aiming for, isn't even possible, then obviously we'll lack any motivation to make any changes. Right? Same thing as anything in our lives. And so we have to truly, deep in our bones and self, believe that it's something that we can achieve. No one is saying putting that on a timeline and saying that it's achievable right now, this instant, this year. No. But it is achievable by humanity. Now, perhaps we can add another factor, another reason that is holding us back. And this is perhaps something that is being encouraged more and more in this culture that we've grown up in the West. But the West is no longer physically, geographically the West, right? Western culture is global now. It's both all spread across the world. And that's this culture and concept of individualism. That I take everything that's important, as meaningful as my personal individual life, and I refuse the concepts and I reject the concepts of the others and society being able to inform and tell me about what I should or shouldn't be doing. And this is something that is seeping in to within our majalis, within our communities as well. How many times have we thought that, oh, why is this person telling me what to do? Why is this person intruding on my personal life? Why are they, coming into my bubble? Right? What is it to you if I pray or don't pray? What is it to you if I do this or don't do that? Right? I'm not hurting you. Right? That's the sort of idea that we have. That's the sort of idea that that we're encouraged to have of religion. An Islam that's between you and your Lord and has no ramifications on your social contact. That's the kind of religion that is in perfect harmony with liberalism. But that's not Islam. At its root, liberalism is completely and utterly intolerant of a religion that goes outside the individual sphere of life. As soon as it enters and starts to inform and direct social conduct, then liberalism becomes intolerant. It says, you can't do that. You can't do that. But Islam very much, strongly, time and time again, is directing social movements and actions. It's telling us, do this and don't do that. Not on the individual space, but on the social space. Look at the level and number of times things are mentioned regarding social obligations and responsibilities in Islam, and it far outnumbers and outweighs what is said regarding individual responsibilities between ourselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned before, one of the chief responsibilities, the greatest of wajibat, is amr bil ma'roof and nahy anil munkar. That's something that, how much is it that we've implemented within our lives? Not about, not talking about, a parent telling to their child. That's something that naturally happens, right? Every parent commands and enjoins their child to do something that they think is good and tells them to stay away from that which they think is bad. And talk about each other, peers. If we see something wrong happening, do we go up to our fellow brother or fellow sister and say, hey, I don't think that's right? Or do we say, no, I can't do that. It'll ruin my relation. Or they'll think that I'm, holier than thou. Or they'll think that, I'm doing this. No. It's not out of any sense of superiority. God told me to do it. It doesn't matter to me if I'm right, if I'm holy or not holy in the sense of how you perceive me. All that matters to me is that I'm doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from me. What happens if we don't have that? If we don't have that relationship of doing amr bil ma'roof and nahy anil munkar with each other? And society decays. Because if we expect ourselves as individuals to be able to stay on the straight path, on the sirat al-mustaqim, despite all of the pressures that exist, then we're fooling ourselves. We're fooling ourselves. We need the support of each other. We depend on the support of each other. To the extent that it's my right. It's my right that if you see me doing something wrong, that you tell me. And if you don't do that, I'll complain against you on the Day of Judgment. Then why didn't you tell me I was doing something wrong when you had the opportunity and you saw it happening? It's my right, it's your responsibility. And the same the other way around. If we don't have that relationship with each other, at the very least, the closest that we are, right? Close friends. If we don't have that relationship, then what kind of friendship is that? What kind of friend is okay with seeing their friend poison themselves? If we actually know what they're doing is wrong, how could we be okay with them doing it? We would try our best to get them to stop. And again, we're not saying that be rude or be harsh or anything like that. No, lovingly. With love, talk to our brothers. With love, talk to our sisters. Say, hey, I care for you, and I really think that this isn't right for you. You shouldn't be doing this. I'm here for you. If you're struggling with something, let me help. Put ourselves out there. We fail to realize that our lives are not our own. Our lives are Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's. He owns it. And He has told us that I don't have the right to put all of my efforts for myself. No. part of my life's efforts are owned by my fellow brothers and sisters. They own my efforts. It's theirs, not mine. So I can't say, it's the easiest sort of to envision in terms of money. I can't say that this hard-worked money, hard-earned money that I have, is mine. I can spend it for whatever I want. No. It's not just mine. Yes, there are priorities. And yes, I do have to sustain myself and my family and things. But beyond that, the mu'mineen have a right as well. Have we seen the hadith that talk about the punishment and the severity of the punishment of the one who goes to sleep while their neighbors are hungry? Then it's even further asked. It says, what does a neighbor mean? Right? In another hadith. It says 40 houses down in each direction. Do we even know our neighbors' names? We can't expect society to be cured and healed and all of these ailments to happen if we don't actually live like a society. If we don't actually live together for each other. The primary problem is that. If I'm not involved enough in your life to know the problems that you're facing, then how could it be expected for me to be able to help you in those problems? There's another hadith, right? I'm paraphrasing this hadith in the interest of time. There's another hadith that says that it's not a fadila, it's not any sort of great honor for a person to give charity, to give money, to help someone when they've been asked. That's not any great honor or some great thing to sort of pat yourself on the back and say, oh, I give charity. That's a no-brainer. You have to do that. What's a thing, a sign of like being noble, having noble characteristic, is that you give before you need to be asked. But in order for that to happen, I have to know. I have to know that that person is dealing with what troubles, what problems. Look around yourselves in this majlis. How much do you know about each other's lives? How much can we say that, oh, I know what this person is dealing with in their lives? Forget about this majlis. Look at your friend circle. Is our friends and our hanging out with friends just at the level of, chit chat and having fun and all of this? Have we ever stopped and had a serious conversation with our friends? And I'm not saying this to youth specifically. I'm saying this all levels, right? Elder generation as well. Have we stopped and asked serious things? What's happening in your life? Do you need help? I'm there for you. If we don't build those bonds, deep-rooted bonds, we can't make any social movement. We can't move forward. We'll continuously be seeing ourselves, and perhaps at best our families, as individual units. And as soon as it comes that I would have to sacrifice something for myself, my individual benefit, or my family's benefit for somebody else, I'll say, why? They're not doing the same for me. We're not really that connected. I don't know you that well. Why would I do it? It's a natural thing. If we want to have that progress and change on that societal level, we have to build ourselves in that way. And this is why I had said previously before, I don't know if I said it in the majlis or one of the discussions, that a necessary, crucial part of any society is living close enough to each other that you see each other often. I'm not saying everyone has to be living on one street. Although if that was possible, that would be great. It would be amazing. But at the very least, a few. Group together. Find places to live together. Even if that means you don't live in the ideal place, that biggest house, the best neighborhood, the best school district. Even if you have to give that up, it's better to give that up to live closer to the mu'mineen. But we don't think on those terms. Again, this world, seeing myself as an individual, it stops me from that. And this is a promise from our imams, that if we want to consider ourselves the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we cannot do it without each other, without having bonds with each other. It is not possible. That means that if I'm just an individual continuously saying to myself that I'm a lover of the Ahlul Bayt, then I'm missing the point. Because there's a great, massive dimension of my life that's missing. Please say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. There's a verse in the Quran that says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله يحب الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the ones who fight and struggle on His path as if they were a firm structure, all together, in one line, in lines like a firm structure. Another ayah in the Quran says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أُدْخُلُوا فِي سِلْمٍ كَافَّةً. O you who believe, enter into heaven altogether. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not regarding us and looking at us as only. The point is to come together. Part of our religion is inaccessible as an individual. We give up a part of our religion if we do not have societal relations. And the caravan that's going is bound closer and closer together. But we see that this is also happening because of direction. It's not that this group randomly came together and then somehow when they came, they all happened to fall into the lap of the Imam. All dimensions of our life oriented by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will. Now I'll say something, and I want everyone to ignore that I have a turban on my head while I'm saying this, because I'm not referring to myself at all. But it's important to say, and so I'll say it on the behalf of those true people who deserve this to be being said regarding. Communities, if we want them to be led towards Islam, then they have to be led by someone who knows Islam. That shouldn't be something very like rocket science or very difficult to understand. It seems quite obvious. But that means that the interactions should be in that manner, where the scholar is the one directing things. The scholar is the one who is directing the community, not the other way around, where the community is directing the scholar. The scholar should not be an employee of a board or a community or anything like that. That's utter nonsense. And I'm not talking about employee in the sort of financial structuring of things, right? So if that's something that needs to be done in order to get the salary, I don't care about that part. I'm talking about the treatment, about the envisioning and the perspective. If it's this way, the goal is to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and supposedly the scholar is the one who knows most about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, then he should be the one determining which way to go. Now I'm not saying that that's something easy, right? That puts a lot of burdens on the scholar. Massive amounts of burdens, because that's not just religious knowledge that's needed. You need to have insight, you need to have the ability to work through these interpersonal relations, you need to be able to have wisdom in dealings and political acumen and all of those things. And so it's a difficult role. But what doesn't work is to just imagine that the scholar is my, sort of the spiritual advisor of the community. And who makes the decisions is, the board, the president, this person, that person, the votes. It doesn't work like that. Look at Imam Ali alayhi salam. And again, make this very evident and clear. I'm not comparing scholars to Imam Ali alayhi salam. I'm not saying that the scholars are Imam Ali alayhi salam. But Imam Ali alayhi salam is obviously showing us a model of leadership and governance. And so we should follow that pattern. Look at Imam Ali alayhi salam. As soon as he becomes the Khalifa, first thing he does, sends a letter to Muawiyah, says, you're no longer the governor. You're no longer in charge of Sham. I have a replacement. And people are saying, wait, don't do that. You're going to do that to Muawiyah? He's like the one with the biggest army, largest resources, most finances. It's going to create war. It's going to be battle. Muslim says, no, I have to do it. And yes, it did create war, and it did create battle. But the point is that Imam Ali saw that that was something that needed to be done. How does he know? It's because of his aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. I'm not denying the political acumen that's needed. I'm just emphasizing that more crucial than that is the Islamic knowledge and awareness of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Because without that, no matter how good in political sort of arrangements you are, how good of a strategist you are, how good of an organizer, manager you are, it doesn't matter if you're going in the wrong direction. Actually, it might be even worse if you're really good in going in the wrong direction. We have to realize that. We take scholars to be in front of us and guiding us in such a small part of our lives. And that shows something bigger to us. That we take God's words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance, to be our compass in such a small part of our lives. Because the assumption is that the scholar knows more about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. We have to reflect on this, right? I'm completely cognizant that that requires a lot of tough decisions, changes, both in structures of how things are built within communities. But if we're not willing to have those difficult discussions, not willing to change how things are done, then we can't progress. We can't solve the issues. We have to be willing to have those conversations. And what better of a time to change things than now? Why wait? Why wait for a future generation? Why wait for someone else to do it? Let's be the first step. Inshallah, we can spend a few moments mentioning the Masa'ib of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Dear brothers and sisters, Ashura draws near. It draws near and we know what's going to happen on those nights, on the night of Ashura, on the day of Ashura and afterwards. And each night our sorrow grows stronger and stronger. On the night of Ashura, Imam Hussein calls all of his companions and his family into a tent, where he tells them that you are the best of companions. You're the best of companions, but I relinquish all oaths, all promises that you've made to me. There's no need for you to stay with me. You can go, you've done your duty. You can go back. If you're ashamed to go back, I'll close the lights, the lanterns, take the hands of one of my family and be saving them, leave with them. The first to respond is the family of Abu Abdullah Hussein. It's reported the first to respond is Abbas. Says, and then what? If you're to die, then why should I live? What do I have to live if you're not here? The Imam turns to the sons of Aqil, his cousins. He says, look, you've already given Muslim. You don't need to die. And he's saying, then what? What will we say to the people? That the greatest of Bani Hashim died and we did nothing? No. And then the companions spoke, one after another, saying that if we were to die and be burnt and our ashes scattered and then revived, we would do it again and again and again in your service. But it's not only men that are in this tent. There's also a young boy listening. Qasim speaks up. He hears his uncle tell them that tomorrow all of you will die. All of you will be martyred with me. And perhaps Qasim is thinking to himself, this is only the adults. He asks his uncle, oh my uncle, will I also die tomorrow? Think of how heartbreaking such a question would be to Imam Hassan. That this remnant of his brother, the trust of his brother, is asking him this question. Imam Hussein asks him, how do you see death? What do you see death as? What does this great youth say? He says, Ahmed min al-asal, sweeter than honey. And so the Imam responds crying, saying that, yes, you too will die tomorrow. On the day of Ashura, when Qasim goes to Imam Hussein to ask him for permission to go onto the battlefield, Imam Hussein first refuses and starts to cry. In some narrations, as he cries so much, falls unconscious. Qasim asks again, Imam Hussein refuses again, until it's said that Qasim starts to kiss the hands and the feet of Abu Abdullah Hussein again and again and again, until eventually Abu Abdullah gives him permission to go. Think about it now, envision it. Qasim is not even baligh, he's not even 14 yet. This young boy is going onto the battlefield. I don't know what equipment, what armor would have fit a boy of that age. He goes onto the battlefield. He fights valiantly until a time comes that he's struck on the head. He cries out, Ya Allah, oh my uncle. It's said that Imam Hussein, hearing this, rushes onto the battlefield. He cuts off the hand of the person who struck Qasim. But in the rush of the armies, in the marching of the horses, the dust settles, and what the people see is that Imam Hussein is on the Imam Hussein is at the head of the body of Qasim, and Qasim's feet are striking the ground. He is giving his last breath. He says, Imam Hussein says, Azza-wallah alayya. It's so difficult upon me, my Allah, it's difficult upon me that you've cried out to your uncle and he cannot respond to you. And if he responds to you, there's nothing he can do to help you. على لعنة الله القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.